Welcome back. Now let's talk about why emotion is so important for your LinkedIn content and why it'll help you sell more often and better. So first off, it's important to understand that most LinkedIn content is logical. It looks something like this. So if I'm reading this, I still have no idea what it means. It's a lot of jargon. It's, very, very dry. Looks like a robot wrote it. So this is what 99% of LinkedIn content looks like. Now, unfortunately, because of that, it doesn't stand out because it's part of the pack. So what can we do to add a little bit of emotion to it? Before I answer that question, it's important to think about a specific memory you have in mind. So close your eyes, think about a strong memory in your head. Whether you got dumped or you got a promotion, whatever it is, think about an emotion that is, or memory that's really, really strong that still stands out in your head. And then I want you to ask yourself, was there a strong emotion tied to it? So going back to the example of getting dumped, did you feel like, dejected? Did you feel sad? Do you still feel heartbroken? If you got a promotion, did you feel elated? Were you ecstatic? Were you so excited? Do you still have that emotion tied up into you? Now, the reason for that is a lot of our memories are tied to really, really strong emotions. So emotions are a way for us to connect different thoughts together. And this goes back to the rule of reciprocity I was talking about. If you want people to connect with you emotionally, you have to be able to put your own emotions out there. And this is what a lot of people struggle to do. I did for the longest time. I thought, I'm going to go the logical route because it's safe, it's easier that way. No one's going to make fun of me if I talk about my emotions on there. But the problem with that is, once again, you are competing with the other 99% of content on the platform. So once again, if you want people to connect with you on an emotional level, you have to be willing to put yourself out there emotionally. So what does that actually look like? So here's an example, and I want to dive a bit deeper into why it works so well. So as you can see in terms of engagement, this is about 4 days ago. It's already broken over 100 total engagement. I think this will continue to climb. I already have several notifications. But I also want to share one more kind of tangible result towards the end. But let's dissect it first. So first, we talk about rejection saved my career. We talked about earlier about the hook, the importance of the teaser at the very beginning. So for me, this was one that really stood out because it's short, it's sweet. I highlighted a word that we can all relate to, so rejection. And then going back to my rule of threes, it's difficult to see here, but I broke it up into 3 chunks. So the first is the first rejection. A top company rejected me when I asked to do a video on the platform. Then I talked about what happened as a result. Then I talked about rejection number 2. A Fortune 500 logistic company rejected my proposal last year. Then I talk about the positive impact as a result of that. And then finally, I talk about rejection number 3, which is a former employer rejected me because I wouldn't break my values. And so, once again, the rule of 3 makes it easier for people to scan and follow what you're doing. And then finally, I try to wrap it up with a quick lesson and then ask people if they've had a similar kind of feeling where they've had rejected. Now, once again, I want to share some of the tangible outcomes here in a minute. But first, let's quickly recap what worked so well in this. So first, I wrote about a strong universal emotion, which is the feeling of getting rejected and all the emotions tied around that. Once again, there's a couple different ways you could write about this. Most people would write about it from the logical point of view, saying that, did you know 77% of people feel rejected in their career based on a poll by Harvard Business Review? That's what most people would write about, rejection, because it's logical, it's safer, it's not coming from you, you're citing a source. But the reason that worked so well is because I'm writing about my own personal experiences getting rejected. I'm not sharing it about someone else. I'm not sharing a quote or a stat that I found. I'm sharing my own personal stories of getting rejected. And it's not the easiest thing to do because they're still quite painful to some extent. But it's important that, once again, rule of reciprocity, if I want people to connect with me on an emotional level, I have to be willing to put myself out there emotionally. So that's something I did by highlighting a universal emotion, which is the feelings around getting rejected. And then I shared three very short stories or examples of me getting rejected to showcase my own experience. Then I mentioned my target audience. I don't know if you caught that in there, but I talked about... So I talked about, because I was rejected by a Fortune 500 logistic company, I was able to focus on what has really been my core focus for the company, which is B2B tech. And so now we're working with companies like LinkedIn, Adobe, and several others. So this was not really intentional. It wasn't really meant to be a sales pitch, but it is something that I subtly put in there. So I subtly mentioned my target audience. And finally, what you saw I did is I provided the lesson. So it's not just me ranting about my personal stories. There is a lesson behind it. It's a little bit inspirational. You could say cheesy. And then finally, I asked people to share their own experience. Because once again, you saw the comments there. They're quite high. People are more inclined to comment, to share their own experiences when you are so candid in sharing yours. So those are three things that I think worked out quite well for it. And from the business point of view, like I was mentioning earlier, the next couple of days, I received about 3 calls from Fortune 500 clients looking to work with us. So it was quite a surprise, and I know several of them read the post because they were referring to it. In the post, I talk about starting my own company. Apparently, several of them did not know I had my own company. So once again, it was interesting the way it caused them to reach out to me because it related to them emotionally. So once again, this is just one example. The caveat here is, obviously, when I set expectations, you have to think of your content as a mountain. So the more content you're putting out that's valuable, the more they connect with you, eventually you're going to have that avalanche where either employers or prospects or media are coming to you. But once again, I don't want to say this is something that happens overnight. Obviously, if you follow me on LinkedIn, you can tell I do this quite a lot. So that's something to keep in mind, is you want to build up your mountain of valuable content, and eventually once it reaches a tipping point, like in this case, you will potentially get flooded with some kind of inquiries from employers or clients. So the next time you make a purchase, I want you to stop and ask yourself, am I doing this for logical or emotional reasons? Think about it. You'd be surprised how strong of an emotion has in our purchase decision.